I purchased the new IFR e-course as soon as I saw it, and it has been amazing. Normally, I do not enjoy online courses because they do not deep dive into the why of a subject or how it relates to other material, but this course contains incredible levels of detail. You even receive expert tips and instruction from someone who has been a CFII for decades. I have been instructing for over 10 years and would recommend this to anyone looking for IFR ground instruction.
Hello folks, Rod Machado here. I'd like to introduce you to an instrument scan technique that I developed many decades ago, and I've used it for training primary students in their first introduction to instrument flying, and instrument students as they start the process of acquiring an instrument rating, and to ATP students to help them perfect their scan. Now, there are 3 parts to this scan, and I'm going to show you the second part. The first part is where you select the attitude, power, and trim conditions for the new attitude that you want. The second part is where you radial scan the primary instruments for the attitude chosen. And the third part is where, when the attitude is chosen, you circular scan or monitor to scan the instruments because you've got the attitude set that you want. Now, the second part is the toughest part, and it's the part that every instrument student or primary student has trouble with when they learn to fly instruments. And that is, how do you know what the primary instruments are that you should be looking at? And that can be quite a challenge. And it takes quite a while to learn how to figure what instrument is primary for a given condition. Well, this scan just makes it a whole lot easier. And the neat thing about this scan is that you can practice it on your flight simulator. And I'm going to use basic analog instruments to show you how to do this. Now, you can certainly do this on the primary flight display, and it's just as easy, but we'll use analog flight instruments. So take a look at it. This is the second part of the 3-step scan. And remember, the first and the third part of the instrument scan are really pretty easy. First part, select the attitude, power, and trim conditions for the flight attitude that you want. And the third part would be to circular scan or monitor scan the instruments once you have that attitude chosen. So hang on, hold on, strap in, and let's take a look and see how it's done. Step 2 of the instrument scan. Step 2 of the 3-step scan procedure is to radial scan the primary instruments. Now, primary instruments are those that display the needed information to accomplish the intended maneuver. These instruments are primary in the sense that they reaffirm that the selected attitude is indeed correct. The primary instruments allow you to fine-tune the attitude selected on the attitude indicator. The primary instruments also provide you with additional information that the attitude indicator is reading correctly. Now, to radial scan means to begin the scan at the attitude indicator. And I've made this easier to remember by placing the word start under the attitude indicator. You should then move to the appropriate primary instrument, extract information from it, return to the attitude indicator, and make a correction in attitude if necessary. This is called the radial scan because the visual scanning track is from the attitude indicator out to the primary instrument, then back to the attitude indicator, making what appears to be spokes radiating from the attitude indicator to all the primary instruments. The attitude indicator is marked start because this is where all attitude changes begin. And it's very important that you understand how the radial scan is accomplished. Your eyes should move from the attitude indicator to a primary instrument, observe its reading or detect its movement, then return to the attitude indicator and make an attitude adjustment necessary to stabilize the primary instrument. Unfortunately, readily identifying in flight which instruments are primary for a given flight condition is difficult for many pilots learning to fly basic instruments. You see, experienced professionals know exactly what instrument they need to look at to make the airplane fly precisely. In fact, skill at flying basic instruments lies not so much in scanning all the instruments, but in learning which instruments deserve the greatest investment of time at any given moment. When time is spent efficiently, the airplane is easily controlled. And this is where instant recognition of the primary instruments become very important if you want to fly instruments with success. And who doesn't want to do that? You don't hear people around the airport saying, no, I want to be a failure at instrument flying. Success is too easy. I want to fail. Fail me now. Well, you don't hear people saying that. There's a good reason, because those people they don't do very well if they manage to fly on instruments for any length of time. You see, there are always going to be 3 primary instruments for any given condition of flight. One for pitch, one for bank, and one for power. If you know which instruments are primary, you can avoid the ocular waste resulting from scanning instruments that provide only redundant information. And the best way to recognize these instruments is to tape the words of the primary instrument under each instrument on your instrument panel. Yes, you heard me correctly. Tape, or using a Post-it or something like that. You see, the FAA considers the word bank to be associated with either holding a heading or a heading change. And this makes sense considering that controlling the bank is directly related to controlling the heading. These instruments here are the primary instruments for specific conditions of flight. For instance, in straight and level flight, you should look at the panel and find those instruments listed as straight and level. The directional gyro is primary for bank or going straight. The altimeter is primary for pitch, remaining level in this instance, and the tachometer is primary for power. Now note, if you are trying to maintain a specific airspeed in straight and level flight, then your airspeed indicator will be primary for power. Under typical conditions, however, we usually use our RPM or manifold pressure gauge to set our power, and we don't worry too much about trying to maintain a specific airspeed. In constant airspeed climbs or descents, airspeed is always the primary pitch instrument. In a turn, the turn coordinator is always primary for bank. And the primary instruments for a climbing turn would be airspeed for pitch, turn coordinator for bank, and tachometer for power. The primary instruments for a level turn would be altimeter for pitch, turn coordinator for bank, and tachometer for power. Now, in a straight climb or straight descent at a specific rate, in other words, the VSI is pointing to a specific number, the VSI is primary for pitch and the heading indicator is primary for bank. If a specific airspeed is necessary for the constant rate descent, as it most often is on some advanced approaches that instrument pilots make, this is known as an ILS approach, then the airspeed indicator will be primary for power. And this is one of the few situations where the tachometer is not primary for power as listed. So think about it this way. What is the job to be accomplished and what is primary to do that job? The job on a constant rate descent is to maintain a specific airspeed, a specific heading, and a specific rate. The only instrument that can do the job of telling you if the airspeed is correct is the airspeed indicator. Power is modified to maintain this specific airspeed. So, to determine which instruments are primary, you should seek the words under each instrument making up the intended flight condition. And this visual prompt precludes the awkward mechanics of having to rigidly memorize the primary instruments. And this, of course, can be a difficult task for the neophyte when instrument relationships may be a bit murky. After you have enough practice with the primary instruments labeled, then these will become familiar and the words can be removed from the panel. Hello folks, this is Rod Machado again. I hope you enjoyed this excerpt from my Art of Instrument Scanning e-course. Now, if you want more detail on how to scan your flight instruments, or if you'd like to do a really deep dive into the world of IFR flying, then visit rodmachado.com and check out these e-courses. For instance, if you want to pass your IFR knowledge exam or your private pilot knowledge exam, then check out my 50-hour and or 40-hour Instrument Pilot eGround School or Private Pilot eGround School, respectively. Not only will you pass the exam, but you'll learn more about the essentials of IFR or VFR flying that you just won't get in other ground training programs. Why? Well, because I've been instructing for over 5 decades, have personally written and illustrated 7 aviation books, 5 of which are aviation textbooks, delivered training programs in all 50 states and many European countries, and have won countless awards from the FAA for my aviation training programs. In short, you won't be taught by a private pilot with limited experience and a basic ground instructor rating. Instead, you'll receive quality ground training that makes it easy and fun to learn. So visit rodmachado.com and check out the large selection of aviation educational courses.